Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar. My name is Karina Trush, and today we'll explore together how to deal with stress, particularly in the context of the workplace. So let's have a look at the agenda for today. We'll start by exploring what is stress and what are the common causes of workplace-related stress. Then we look at some opportunities for employers to reduce stress for their staff. We'll explore what are the skills and tools required to handle daily stressors, how to develop strategies and techniques to reduce the stress levels, and finally, what tools can be used by employers to boost the employees' performance. Okay, so let's start by exploring stress itself. Usually, we talk about stress when we experience imbalance between the demands of the situation and our coping capabilities. So sometimes demands can be just related to single trigger, one huge event that is at the time short term, but is so intensive that it's really difficult to cope. But sometimes it might be completely the other way. We experience a lot of small daily stressors, but over the time they build up and they might also exceed our coping capabilities. And in this second case, it might be a little bit more challenging to identify the triggers for the stress. So we try to look at context of our work and personal life in more holistic way, trying to gather all these smaller stressful life events and see all of them in context. Once we are able to identify the triggers, we try to explore why these triggers are important for us. What do they mean for us? And that takes us into exploring our holistic reaction to the stress. So the meaning that we give to the situation is related to our cognitive processing. What do we think of the situation? And quite often when we see the situation as exceeding our coping capabilities or putting us in some sort of risk, it will be reflected in our feelings, in stress, anxiety, sometimes anger or irritability. We'll be also able to notice these reactions in our body. Our body will usually go into physiological fight or flight response, and we will look into that reaction in a second. And finally, we are able to notice some changes in our behavior. The easiest way to notice the changes in the behavior is to look at what am I doing more than usual or what am I doing less than usual. Sometimes when we overthink around some potential changes that we might experience in the near future or current challenges, for example, in the workplace, we might observe some increase in some coping initially helpful strategies, for example, excessive planning around the future. So when at some point we become overly dependent on these behaviors, we don't consider them any more helpful because we don't build up tolerance to manage some uncertainty and distress. And with each new trigger for uncertainty, our reactions might become even stronger. But quite often when we experience stress or anxiety or irritability, we might rather observe some reduction in usual coping behaviors. So for example, we might disengage with our hobbies, with social interactions. We might have less time for the self-care. And for that reason, it's always very important to be able to check what am I doing more than usual and what am I doing less than usual. And also observing behavior will be the easiest for the managers, for the employer to be able to consider what might be the stress levels in a team. Because in behavior, we are able to observe, for example, increased sick leave, more conflicts in the team, lower productivity, less space for employees' adaptations to the changes. So the behaviors will be definitely the easiest one to spot for the employer. Now let's have a look at physiological responses to stress. Why is this important? It's important to understand that physiological stress response is something very automatic. We are not able to plan it. It just happens. So for example, when you walking down the street and suddenly there is really fast car driving just in front of you, you can just automatically jump back and protect yourself. And in these cases, physiological stress response is helpful. But we have exactly the same reaction to psychological stress. So workplace stress, challenges in communications with colleagues in the team, maybe too many demands related to the role. And when at this stage, we also suddenly freeze and are not able to plan our behavior, it's not helpful anymore. Usually, when we don't experience a stress reaction, we might consider this, as you can see on the picture, this level 1, when we are open towards social engagement. Let's have a look now at physiological reaction to stress, because it can give a little bit more context to why sometimes we withdraw from our activity when experiencing stress, and why sometimes we might increase some of the activities. So when we don't experience stress, we could say that we are in the social engagement zone, when we are curious towards our environment, we want to engage in activities with other people, we're feeling grounded, we're compassionate both to ourselves and other people, open to new experiences, mindful, we are able to feel that we are present in the moment. And once we start to experience stress, when there is a sudden trigger, we might move towards the fight or flight reaction, when our nervous system gets activated. And both reactions, although similar, they are slightly different. So at this stage, our body is getting ready to fight the danger. Our body is trying to get oxygen to then deliver this to skeletal muscles to transform it into energy. And that energy can be used to fight the danger. At this time, we can experience anger, irritation, frustration, or we might want to run away from the danger. For example, when it seems that we might not have enough resources to fight the trigger. So it makes sense when we think about physical danger. It doesn't seem as helpful when we think about psychological stress, but unfortunately, the reaction in our body is exactly the same. So that can inform us in understanding when we start to experience very early signs of stress. So for example, when we start to feel a little bit more agitated, when it's hard to sit in one place, when we have some maybe tension around our shoulders, or when we suddenly want just to get up and go for a walk or change the room, that can be indication that our body is beginning to move into fight or flight response. And that is a very good place to consider some grounding exercises before the reaction is too challenging to overcome. Unfortunately, when we experience too much stress. So when these situation demands are definitely exceeding our coping capabilities, we might at some point move into the freeze response. So that's basically when our body and mind considers that the situation is just too challenging to manage at the time. We use all of our coping strategies and we start to feel hopeless about the possibilities of overcoming this situation. We might feel numb. We feel like we are not able to solve the situation problem, and we basically shutting down, and our body is trying to save the remaining energy to survive. And at this stage, it's much harder to manage stress, and we must give ourselves some time to soothe, to build up some energy again, and implement very mindfully appropriate coping strategies. So by this observation of how we tend to respond to stress, we gradually might become more aware of our personal stress triggers. But let's have a look at what are the most common triggers for stress. So usually we would experience stress to situations that seem unpredictable. So for example, when we had no ability to predict that this situation could have occurred. Also, we experience stress when there is some novelty involved, when we've never experienced before similar experience, when there is threat involved. So that might be either when we face direct physical threat, but it might be also when, for example, our competences as a person are called into question, and that can be a very common trigger in a workplace. Also, quite often we experience stress when we have limited sense of control over the situation, or when we are not necessarily able to plan how we want to approach the situation. So now, one by one, we will try to brainstorm how these different groups of triggers can be experienced in a workplace. Okay, so we might experience unpredictability when employees are not being actively engaged in change management planning, and they are surprised by any changes that are happening in a company, or even informed after or not informed about planned changes at all. Also, naturally, unpredictability can be experienced when there are some sudden changes to the job description. So for example, the person might start new role, and after, let's say, 1 month in this new role, it turns out that the factual job description is completely different than it could have been perceived during the recruitment. Also, it might be experienced when employees don't fully understand their role or responsibilities, even though they might be correctly described. When employees don't receive enough information and support, when there is unclear structure of career progression and rewarding, when the pay is not tailored to the increased cost of living. For example, at the moment, it can be observed worldwide in context of high inflation. Also, when there are unclear communication channels, so it's not clear which bits of information should be forwarded to which level of management, and which informations are which bits of information are open towards the whole team, and what is only supposed to be kept confidential and only shared with the management. Next group of workplace triggers can be related to novelty. We can experience these triggers when employees are not engaged, when a business is undergoing change. So any change management actually is a trigger in all these 4 different triggers. Now let's have a look at triggers related to novelty. So again, this can be experienced when employees are not engaged in business change, when the onboarding training plan does not include implementation of new processes, tools, and communication channels that can even include use of new software, when there is high pace of increasing productivity targets, when there is high job rotation, which can also impact workplace relationships and between the teams, when employees don't receive enough information and support regarding changes at organizational level, and when there are inconsistent management styles. Triggers related to poor sense of control in a workplace might include employees not being able to control the way they do their work, employees not working in a setting that they prefer. For example, that can include sudden transition from remote work to work from office, working in a challenging environment overall, for example, hot desking, working in high noise levels. Employees might be challenged in their personal life due to shift work. They might not be able to plan their breaks or meetings. Employees are not provided with regular line management supervision, or the supervision has unclear structure, and the time allocated for the job requirements might not be sufficient. Triggers related to threat might include employees being excessively encouraged to compete, employees being challenged in relationships at work, or being bullied. Employees' competencies might be questioned in indirect communication or in front of others, rather than during the supervision. Employees might not be rewarded for career successes, or the work benefits might be suddenly reduced, which is unrelated to the work performance. Employees might experience high levels of stress as part of their professional role. There might be some limitations to the workplace safety, both psychological or physiological. Employees are exposed to risk in a wider work-related environment. For example, due to the shift work, there might be some limitations to use safe commuting to and from work. There might be no psychological well-being support provisions, or these are not tailored to the job demands. The equality and diversity in a workplace is challenged. Now let's have a look at how employers can reduce workplace stress for the employees. So it's important to look at these opportunities to reduce stress levels at 4 different levels, starting from individual level, through team levels, company levels, and also environmental context. To reduce stress at individual levels, it's important to implement consistent and tailored well-being support, be clear about the rewarding pathway, encourage employees to recognize the purpose in their job progression, and encourage them to be able to link it to their personal values, offering provisions to develop skills, be clear about career progression and the clarity of role description, and encouraging employees to co-produce different work processes. At teams level, again, it's important to deliver tailored well-being support for the whole teams, encouraging teams to implement innovation and contribute creative ideas towards how the company can develop. Consider flexible working across the teams, offering rewards for the teams, so not just on individual level, but again, recognizing the performance that can be achieved only thanks to the cooperation between the team members. Creating space for open communication and development of soft skills within the team, encouraging teams to be involved in a change management, and creating opportunities for leadership and encouraging present team leaders to create future leaders rather than to just maintain their position. At company level, it's important to implement equality and diversity practices. There is huge scope for human resources work, and that doesn't include only delivering recruitment or planning pay structure, planning well-being programs across the company, clarity around company values, and also making sure that these values are reflected in current policies, implementing and planning change management across company, being open towards the feedback from individuals and teams and other businesses the company cooperates with, and implementing trust and safety. At an environmental level, it's important to consider how the business is impacting local community. Is it supportive, or is it somehow challenging for the local community? Because most likely employees are part of this community. It's also important to acknowledge social challenges that can relate to any processes related to current cultural, political events. Also some challenges to the living conditions in an area where employees live. Impact of the company on environment, and also how the whole structure of the business is adapted to supporting individuals that are identifying with protected characteristics, and also considering local laws, which can be quite often omitted when we consider international companies, and there might be some discrepancy between the law of the main office and the satellite offices. In this part, we will look at the skills and tools required to handle daily stressors. So looking at this aspect quite broadly, we would like to develop some self-awareness around our individual reactions to stress and ability to recognize our individual stress triggers. So we can look at 3 different layers, and starting from the bottom, it's important that we are able to identify our long-term goals, to consider how these personal and professional goals are aligned with our sense of purpose and with our values. And it also includes developing balanced areas of life. And we will look into that in a moment as well. Based on these skills, we are able to attend to mindful habit building. We are able to engage in social activities. We are able to develop our attention flexibility, and it's easier to implement self-care activities in our daily routine. And finally, thanks to these skills, we are better in problem solving. Our executive skills can be improved. We are more mindful and compassionate, and it's easier for us to recognize our stress levels and plan ahead against them. So looking at 9 pillars of balanced life, we can use this metaphor of ancient building. I'm sure everyone can imagine this this image from some holiday postcards. So we want to look at 9 pillars of balanced life. There are different considerations for managing stress at the moment when we experience the stress, but use of different grounding techniques at the moment when we are feeling stressed will be only temporary. What we would like to develop is to make sure that we are developing consistently with our values in many different areas of our life. So each of areas can represent one pillar, and well, the building is strong only when it can be supported by many pillars. When we only focus on one area of life, for example, work or friends or only health, when the stress demands exceeds our coping capabilities, we don't have another leg to stand on. So that's why it's important to screen from time to time what are the important areas for us in our life, and is there anything else that we could do more to make sure that we are building our personal resources within this area. So quite often we could use in this to visualize the importance of balanced life, we could use the metaphor of water bucket. So imagine that water bucket is everybody's individual bucket to cope with stress. So many people can have a big bucket where they can contain a lot of water. So that would be a lot of stress. Some people might not be able to contain as much. But at the end of the day, no matter how much we are able to cope at particular moments, when there is gradually dripping, when the water is gradually dripping into the bucket, and we don't do anything to let the water out, at some point, unfortunately, it will get full and we won't be able to cope anymore. Sometimes it can get full just due to a singular life event, but it doesn't matter how frequent or how intensive are the stress triggers. We need to create some strategy to release this water out, and that would be these different areas of our life where we can engage with others, engage in our hobbies, engage in some pleasurable activities, and that will basically balance the scale up. Mindfulness might be great first step to start building up awareness of our stress triggers, and also it can be great choice of the habits that could be used to increase our resilience. So here you can see a couple of different ideas how mindfulness can be practiced in a workplace, and we can tailor this accordingly to our capabilities, to our work and environment. And the main important aspect of how we practice would be trying to make it regularly to create a habit. Finally, when we think about the resilience, it's not just around workplace well-being, it's also our psychological well-being, our physical well-being, and our social well-being. And it's important that these different areas of our life are also related to these different well-being areas. In this part, we will look at how to develop strategies and techniques to reduce stress levels. So it's important to create a plan that is tailored to our individual needs and preferences. And we need to take basically one step at a time. So first, it's important to observe ourselves. When do we experience increased stress levels, and what might be our areas for future development? Then, once we are having some initial observations and reflections, it's important to be able to identify problems that can be solved and goals that are addressing these problems. And we try to write down goals as SMART goals, being very specific and time-bounded. For each of these goals, we try to create a plan in a time. We make decisions about how often are we going to engage in particular activities, how long, who is going to be with us during this practice, and how will we be able to notice that we've made some progress. It's important to track our progress and from time to time to review our plan. Once we are satisfied with the results, we still want to review our plan and make next step goals. But also it's important to share our successes with people that are significant for us, that we care about, and that can also create a lot of reciprocity effect and encourage other people to be inspired by our personal development. So what are SMART goals? SMART goals are specific, measurable, action-oriented, relevant, time-bounded, evaluated, and recorded. We want to focus on the outcome. We need to ask ourselves, how will I recognize that my goal has been achieved? Why the outcome of this goal is important for me? What is the cost of not completing the goal? To create a little bit more context. We want to navigate our goals by our personal values, and we shouldn't be worried if we are noticing any barriers towards achieving our goals, because once we are able to acknowledge the barriers, we can again plan against them. It's important to then evaluate our goals. Do they seem to be realistic? So if we, for example, plan completely new activity, it's helpful to check with ourselves, when did we do something new recently? So will this new activity be very challenging? Would it be very much out of our usual routine? And how confident are we to change our routine and allow ourselves to put ourselves out of comfort zone? We also want to see, is this current moment a good space for a change? It's good to visualize where this change might take us. Next step is about deciding what exactly are we going to do and exploring some options about how these changes can be implemented. So we try to always look at any changes that we approach, any plans, any goals related to reducing stress triggers or developing new stress management strategies from the perspective of a dreamer, where we are enthusiastic about the change, we don't see any barriers, and from this perspective, it feels like everything is possible. Then we look at the outcome of our reflection from the realist perspective, where we try to consider how this very optimistic plan could be now implemented into life, and how can we make it realistic to approach. At this point, we also are considering any potential barriers. Once we feel that plan is rather more than less realistic, we look at our goals from the critic perspective, where we try to identify a new layer of potential barriers. But the purpose of this perspective is not really to devaluate our idea, but to be able to identify another possibilities for improvement. Finally, once we make decisions which habits we would like to implement in our daily life, it's very helpful to create rituals around them. And it's also good to include some small everyday moments of pleasures in building new coping strategies. So savoring is a capacity to notice, appreciate, and prolong positive experiences in life with focusing our attention and awareness on positive feelings. So it's so much easier to experience and notice challenging situations, but every day we experience a lot of good events that are very easy to omit. And the purpose of creating savoring rituals is some gratitude practice where we can redirect our attention to small pleasurable activities that are not necessarily challenging, but they just give us some enjoyment. And that can be a really great strategy to approach building stress reduction habits as a first step. Very often when we make decision to commit to very ambitious goals at first, we create a lot of pressure. Quite often we might also pick up on the activities that we were trying to approach in the past, and that also create a lot of context where we want to perfect the activities that we are undertaking. And when we take this approach of creating savoring rituals, it's much more easy to start and maintain. The other approach could be to start some new activities that we have no experience with, but also we don't have any expectations of how well should we be doing them. Okay. Finally, let's have a look at how to boost employees' performance and which tools could be used by employees to support this. Again, we can relate it to 4 different layers, from the individual layer through teams level, company level, and finally to the environment. Starting from the environment, it's important that employer is open towards creating innovative working environments, which can boost employees' creativity. The other opportunity is to create psychologically safe working environment, not just meeting the basic criteria, but trying to provide quality services. Next important aspect is around developing policies to support inclusion, equality, and diversity, and offering well-being initiatives to support employees' connection with the local community. What I would like to recommend at this point is to join one of the Zevo's webinars on creating environmental well-being. At the company level, we would be looking at employer promoting quality and diversity, engaging employees in change management, asking for feedback, implementing well-being surveys, which might be one of the ways of checking feedback around the well-being initiatives, introducing tailored well-being programs, providing trust and safety structure, promoting company values in everyday activities in a workplace, supporting leadership skills development, introducing digital well-being tools which can be accessed by employees, not just in the workplace, but also from the comfort of their own home, introducing flexible working arrangements and innovative recruitment strategies, which is recently quite popular new trend where employees are recommending the personal connections to be employed within the company rather than creating the whole recruitment structure. And also a very important thing is to join our Zevo Health Fittest Workplace challenge, and you may find more information about it on our website. At teams level, we would be looking at promoting team well-being initiatives, promoting open communication, delivering skills for ongoing soft skills development and executive skills, promoting creativity, introducing informal activities in a workplace, and that could include team activity challenges, which are also offered through Wellbeing 360, asking for feedback, rewarding team successes that we've already talked about before, providing space for group activities, where activities are decided by employees and teams, and of course, introducing Zevo Health Wellbeing 360. And employees levels, it's important to offer consistent and tailored individual well-being support, also including digital tools, providing clarity of the role description, rewards, and career progression pathway, encouraging employees to identify areas for development consistent with personal values, encouraging co-production of working models, and development of personal and professional skills development, offering individual psychological and coaching support in a workplace, offering benefits that promote physical and nutritional well-being. That can be offered also through the providing helpful environmental structure of the offices, and current sharing individual achievements between the employees, set up clear productivity goals to minimize toxic competition. So that can be quite well achieved by balancing, acknowledging successes of individuals and the teams, delivering training for ongoing executive and soft skills development, and adjusting working hours to support sleep hygiene and social well-being. Finally, you may learn more about how well-being programs can be tailored to context of different company structures on our website. And for that, you can also use contact form to get more information that is tailored to your expectations and needs. Thank you.